shirt, but it wasn't a yellow background.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I remember you said yellow. Because I was like, oh, maybe I can find something that's yellow will like match.
And don't you look adorable with your bow in your hair and your blue necklace? That's very
Thank
nice.
you. Well, I
Really?
got the necklace. I got it sponsored by Trang Lee from our
I,
class of 1994
I love Trang. Yeah, yeah.
because I was trying to find like inexpensive ways to like jazz up my look. And
Okay.
so she was getting rid of stuff in her closet. So I was like, hey, if you want to donate anything and sponsor the podcast, I need to change up my looks. So she donated a bunch of jewelry.
I feel that way all the time at my age.
And
So
then I
yeah.
was like, I need stuff for my hair. So I got like a bunch of bows from Amazon and like
How's my,
headbands.
by the way, how's the lighting? Okay. I had a Zoom call yesterday for about an hour and a half with my friend Ken.
Yeah.
He didn't mention it, but then again, he's not producing the way you are.
Oh, he did mention it?
No, he didn't. I'm saying he
Oh, he
didn't mention it.
didn't. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But he likes you. He was watched a couple of podcasts. So
Oh, he
okay, so
did?
yeah. So speak to me. I almost didn't find the link because I had a special
Wait, did you bring a
archive.
drink?
Yes, I did.
You did? Okay. All right. Go ahead. What were you saying?
This is I should today is Cinco de Mayo. I should be I
Oh,
so
yeah.
this is actually tequila. So it's the what is it? Jose Cuervo, the brown, because they have white and they got brown and
Oh my God. I didn't bring tequila. Well, welcome to the Art Hustle Gallery of Conversations. Welcome back here, Captain Schiavo, with your fabulous bright shirt that you have on today of your 169. I'm so happy for you to be here. And we're here today to talk about your video that you had just put up recently, the Jabberwalkies, of you teaching
right.
your curriculum to the Stony Brook teachers.
Uh-huh.
And I want
Okay.
to talk to you more about that because I think it's really important, everything that you were talking about there, because it goes into correlation of what I'm doing here and the aspect of people trying to, separate and find themselves and find their
Uh-huh.
voice and their
Right.
authenticity. So
Mhm.
I want to find out more about how you got into that curriculum and how did you figure all of that out.
Okay. Um, First of
Oh,
all,
but
remember.
wait, let's cheers.
Oh yeah. Hey, listen.
Well, hey,
Cheers. What's
cheers
that?
to Cinco de Mayo, right? So
That's right.
cheers.
For all of our Espanol friends.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, cheers.
And we have many of those. And yeah, so it's and any reason to drink during the day is fine by me.
Any point that we can celebrate life, I can have a drink and
Yes.
talk to my favorite mentor teacher, Schiavo. I'm down
Well,
for it.
I had this conversation with my doctor. I had a doctor's appointment yesterday morning.
Hmm.
Was it yes? Yeah, a Tuesday morning. And then I had my conversation with my friend Ken yesterday afternoon. And again, matters of health and mortality have been on my mind the last couple of days because I go to the doctor to find. Every time s- one goes to the doctor, you know, y- one of those days, instead of saying, "Oh, I got your blood work back, everything's good,"
Yeah.
they're gonna say, so, one day you're gonna go if you don't die suddenly, you're gonna go to the doctors and they're gonna say, "Uh-oh, there's something nefarious and malevolent showing in your blood work."
Hmm.
And then they'll tell you how many months or weeks you have to live, And so
Yeah.
if you don't die fast. And so, this is comes you come to grips with this, and I'm more not to be morbid, but the fact that I have lost so many people close to me in the last few months.
Hmm.
Uh, Two of my oldest surf pals, and my brother-in-law, and it's all very. It reminds you that we're not here forever, and so going back to what your comment is about, celebrate every day. You can celebrate that you're up and standing, and you can enjoy a new day and things like that. Hey,
Yep.
you take it.
I
Now,
totally agree. I mean, I wake up every morning and I'm grateful that I wake up because you just never know when your
right.
time is up.
Hey, not only that, you could be like this perfect example. Back in October, I'm sitting on my couch, I'm petting my dogs, I finish reading my papers and stuff, and all of a sudden I start to feel a pain, and I say, "Uh-oh," and I knew what it was because I had something like that 20 years ago, and
Can
all
you
of a sudden,
explain it? Like, where was the pain?
well, I think it was my lower right side, and what it was. was a kidney stone.
Mm.
And anybody, every woman I've ever talked to who said they had a kidney stone has told me it was as painful, if not more painful, than childbirth.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
I was between islands in French Polynesia. We were one of my favorite spots on the planet is an island called Huahine in French Polynesia, and we were on our way to Raiatea. Okay, on a very posh, kind of elite yacht. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
and of course now of course and it was Christmas Eve. Okay,
You got to go
so I'm
big.
huh?
You got to go big or go home.
Well, that was it. So it was Christmas Eve, and of course it was a French ship, and the cuisine was spectacular. They made great fresh baguettes. It was great. Anyway,
Mm.
so here's the thing. Uh, I started feeling it. I was snorkeling still on Huahine, and I thought it was my old back problem from my horse. My wife was an excellent diagnostician. She's an RN. She should have really gone on to be a nurse. What do you call it? Nurse practitioner, if not a
Yeah.
doctor. She's diagnosed stuff, and I go, oh no, no, no. And she goes, I'm just telling you. You don't want to believe me because I'm your wife, but you know what? No, it's true. 'Cause she diagnosed me.
Isn't that always the case?
Yeah, really. She diagnosed me when I was out fishing with her one day, just the two of us, and had my
Hmm.
shirt off. And
Hmm.
we fluke fishing, and she says to me, "Take a look at your belly button." I said, "Yeah, it's always been there." She goes, "No, you don't understand. I think you have an umbilical hernia." I went, "What?
Oh,
How do you know that?" She goes, "Well, always have had an innie, and this was more like was had become an outie." I said,
wow.
"Yeah." So I said, "Really?" Well, then of course I find out. I poo-pooed it. Then I had about a couple of days later humongous pains. Okay, and what I found out was that I was lucky that those pains passed, but ultimately I had to be operated on because that's very if you're they call it was it they have two different terms, and so but if it happened once again on the boat, and she said to me, "You have got to get off that boat, and you've got to get to a doctor." At which point they sent me automatically to the emergency room to operate on me
Hmm.
because if it had constricted enough, what it does is it ties off, it restricts all the blood coursing through your body, and you got about 8 hours to live.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she
So
saved your life.
yes, absolutely. And then of course, so she now goes going back, and that was I'm sure that was after my
But how
experience
does
with.
that happen?
It could be a lot of things, It's basically what's whatever the casing is, it ruptured. Okay,
Oh, okay.
and they have different ways of fixing it, but but going back to my kidney stone, the, a French doctor came with this little black bag, literally sat on my bedside. Okay, on Christmas Eve, I thought, how the hell you
Yeah.
cannot get a doctor in this country almost any time
Yeah.
come to your house and sit on your bed and mop your fevered brow like they used to do when we were we were kids. And they got him, I guess, because it was a very very posh ship with a lot of money involved, and they said,
You got to
"Well,
have some doctor on call.
that's right." So he came on. He gave me a couple of two shots, two vials of pills, and said, "Okay." And of course, what was my big concern? He came on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Christmas Eve dinner was at 6, and I knew it was going to be spectacular, right? So I said, "Well,
So
look,
you're
can
like,
I?"
can I still eat dinner?
Yeah, well, I said, well, this was great. He goes, can I still, when will I be like, ready to go eat dinner?
Mhm.
He goes, well, actually, you could probably do it in a couple hours. Because he said, you'll probably be able to make dinner. I said, well, wait a second. Could I have a martini at dinner? He goes, well, do you like martinis? I said, yeah. Like, he said, well, yeah, knock yourself out. I said, you're my kind of doctor. Okay.
Mhm.
But so then I asked them the big question because remember I'm a tourist on this fancy ship and everything on the fact of the yacht. I mean, it's not a ship; it was really small. Okay,
Yeah.
it only carried like 30 passengers, right?
Mhm.
So he, so I said, well, okay, what's this going to cost? Being a tourist,
Mhm.
and I think okay, whatever it was, I was going to put on my credit card. He goes, 50 euros, and I'm thinking, what? And I'm saying, later on, I said to my wife, well, wow, that's not bad at all.
Yeah.
So he says to me something I never forgot. He goes, well, he said, well, we we Europeans, okay, we take care of, we take care of our people. This is not the United States, okay? And
Hmm.
I just said, because think about socialized medicine.
Hmm.
It was France and French Polynesia, things like that. And I've experienced socialized medicine in England and also in Canada. Okay,
Hmm.
and I've become a big fan because anyway. But long and short of it is, a doctor came to take care of me on Christmas Eve. It cost me
Yeah.
50 euros, and and I never forgot it. This is part of our problem. Our medical system is horrendous.
So
It's
it's
horrendous.
socialized medicine where everyone gets free.
Yeah, and that's another thing. What happened was the ship must have picked it up. I didn't have to pay a dime. Okay,
Hmm.
but what happens is that people say, "Well, socialized medicine, you can't get a doctor, and if you want to." Well, you know what? There's lots of things wrong with socialized medicine, but the fact of the matter is, you don't impoverish a family with socialized medicine. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so that's the key. The key is, you shouldn't have to remortgage your home or lose it because you
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
You know. There's no question. I'm not. We'll get into this next time we talk, but um, I'm more of a, how shall I say? I'm definitely a liberal, and I definitely believe in socialized medicine and or some form of that. Yes, I've got excellent health care, thank goodness, but that's thanks to my union. Okay, so does my wife. But not everybody in this country is so lucky.
Yeah.
So. But meanwhile, let's go back to your. I don't know if you're going to cut this out or not because we're going to go talk about something
No,
else.
I mean everything we talk about is good information to tell people because I wasn't aware of. I know there's different types of insurance and everything, but I didn't know the name of it, like socialized medicine.
Mhm.
So that's
Well, I mean, for example, the British, when they did the Olympics over there, they went and made a big deal in the opening ceremony about their socialized medicine. Okay, that would never happen in this country. If anything, we probably shouldn't be proud of it because it's crazy. It's crazy expensive, and it's hard. Like I just had to make an appointment for an endocrinologist
hmm.
this morning. Now it's May 5th.
Yeah,
Do you know when I could get the appointment?
a month or two later.
What month?
A month.
December.
Yeah, a month.
Not a month.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean,
No,
yeah,
how many
I was
months?
I was
No.
watching this podcast about our insurance and the it's like a pretend crazy book that people, the hospitals just decide to jack up all the prices so they in turn can give this crazy price to the insurance people and then they like do all of their mumbo jumbo and then you get charged with this like crazy like mysterious number which none of it makes sense. There's just no need for all of that.
But my point, I want you to hear me again. This is May 5th,
Hmm.
and the guy says to me, "Well, the next available appointment is in December 7th. December,
December.
December. That's when.
December, not even a month.
No,
December.
not even a month. What? May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December.
I don't
That's it.
understand. This what if this is could be an emergency?
Then you'd have to go to a hospital,
Oh, or urgent care.
whatever, you know.
Hmm.
But an endocrinologist, they deal with people like diabetics and things. But anyway, I digress totally. But just another thing to complain about. People say, "Oh, we're the greatest country in the world." No, we're not the greatest country in the world. Okay, and we've just proved it yesterday because our Constitution really means pretty much nothing, thanks to the new Supreme Court with right-wing extremists running the show. That we'll save that for our next podcast. Okay, let's get to, because I could go on for hours about that. Let's go. You
Well, that's
asked
what
me.
I mean. When you ask me, what are we going to talk about today? I'm like, well, Schiavo, I know how our conversations go, so I can give you a topic, but we can just continue talking about
Well, no, but
whatever we want.
I gave a lot of thought to what you told me last week you were going to wanted to talk about, which is that particular video that I
Yes.
put up. I put up on YouTube,
Hmm.
and it was it was a, a lesson that I've done in high school, and I've done it in college every year that I taught since
Yeah.
I first came across it.
Yeah.
And it was about the poem Jabberwocky. Now, Jabberwocky was written by Lewis Carroll, uh, also known, his real name was Charles Dodson, as I recall. And
Hmm.
and of course, he's the one who wrote Alice in Wonderland.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, oh yeah. And so, and he was a brilliant, brilliant mathematician. I mean, so a lot
Mm.
of
Hmm.
people, physicists and mathematicians, when they read Alice in Wonderland, they're always astounded because they had a lot of stuff that was pertinent to mathematicians and things like that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Never
So
knew that.
anyway,
See, I love all of this knowledge that I gain.
so listen to this. So
Yes.
now, of course, I remember when I was a student, and they would do Jabberwocky because teachers like to do Jabberwocky and other Lewis Carroll poems because they're fun and they're funny and kids kind of giggle, and they have a lot of have some really interesting what they call portmanteau words, words that are one word is mixed into another word and to make a new word. And so, but they would say in the old days, well, this is really what they call a nonsense poem. Okay. And I said, after reading it a number of years in the class, I said, you know what? And also with my other readings in other areas like philosophy and mythology and, cultural anthropology, stuff like that. I said, you know what? There's more to this. This is not really a nonsense poem. If you look at it really critically, okay, you're going to find that it's much more profound than that. And so what happened was I gave a class one day, and and I mentioned it in the video that it spontaneously arose from my consciousness when I started to explain this poem. Okay, and I said, no, no, this poem, it's not nonsense. And I kept asking the question. Now, students, I'm going to tell you certain things, and then I want you to answer that question: is it a nonsense poem or not?
Hmm.
By the end, giving my explication of that poem, they were supposed to say, "Oh my God, no, it's not a nonsense poem." Because then I said to them, "Really, it's not. It's about not the meaning of life, but about the meaning of the experience of life as we all experience it."
I love
Okay.
that. That part was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Part of where I got that notion from was from reading many, many, many things by the late uh, mythologist and professor Joseph Campbell. Okay, and so uh, and we talk about part of what goes on there. They talk about the psychologist Carl Jung, uh, who believed about certain things about the unconscious. Okay, and how human beings process information. One of the reasons why we tell stories is because we have this collective consciousness as a species, and we use symbolism and use metaphor to make our points in those stories. Okay, and the point he wrote a book called "Hero with a Thousand Faces," and what he was really saying is most of the great stories in every culture
Hmm.
has this hero, different name, different face, but they all do the same thing. They have a journey, okay? And this whole notion of what he used to call separation, initiation, and a return. That the hero separates from his culture, separates from his loved ones, separates from his whole life, and then uh, he is initiated into the world and initiated into his own development and recognition of self by these various adventures. And what happens with these heroes is they always ultimately prevail. They prevail. Okay? And then after they prevail, after they emerge victorious from these incredible, feats of daring do and obstacles and so on, then they return to their families, to their culture, to whatever, and they say, guess what? I emerge victorious from these great difficulties and obstacles, and if I can do it, you can too. Okay?
Hmm.
That's the story of Oedipus. That's the story of, Odysseus. That's the story of Jesus Christ. Okay? And Buddha. All of them. You name it. You name a great hero and a great story. That metaphor of separation, initiation, return is operational on that. All right. So I gave this lesson, and I was telling to the group that it came to me because of all my readings, and this is where you say, how did you get to that? How did you get that lesson? Because, and I used to tell this to my student teachers at the college level, university level, at St. Joseph's and at Stony Brook. You have to understand when you're teaching a course in literature. Literature is about life, okay? Which means you don't want to be narrow in scope and say, well, I'm only going to read, great classical literature, and I'm only going to talk about that in class. I'm going to talk about onomatopoeia and all this other. No, You have to look at the big picture, and you have to bring like philosophers do. I mean, among the smartest people, best educated people on the planet are philosophers because they're trying to get at the existence and the substance of truth. Okay,
Mhm.
that which means they have to know a lot of other things,
Yeah.
science stuff and math stuff and cultural stuff and whatever. And I found that like physicists to me are among those kinds of people. They're like philosophers because they have to know about lots of different things, which a lot of times are not visible to the human eye.
Yeah.
So, and so what that video shows, it doesn't show me reading the poem and going through it line by line, which I did. What it is the last half hour or so of after I read the poem, and I asked them the question, okay, do you think this poem is nonsense? And that so that lesson then proceeds. I proceed to show them why I thought it wasn't nonsense. Now, my friend last night asked me because he's a professor. He said, "Well, where did you get that from?" I said, "No place. I don't know that anybody else has come up with that interpretation.
Mhm.
I could be wrong, but I can make the argument that I'm probably right about that it's more profound than just a nonsense poem." Okay,
Yeah.
and I think that to someone training teachers, I tried to show them you must and should bring everything else into your personal reading experience and lived experience.
Mhm.
Try to uh, ex- explicate any piece of literature to make it relevant to the lives of your students and to your own life. Okay.
So they can relate.
Yeah. So maybe at one point you can post that link to that video and they can watch it. I would suggest that they read the poem Jabberwocky first. It's a very short poem. It fits on one page. I mean, it's not going to take, they can read it in literally 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they can look at it and go, well, you and they should be, they'll probably enjoy it. They might giggle, like, and you could, by the way, I used to teach that poem in junior high school and high school and university. Okay. And how far you go with it in terms of its profundity is strictly involving the age of the kids. And by the way, I never say, well, the kids in seventh grade can't understand this. No, that's not that you don't do that with high school, with secondary level kids. Lots of adults don't realize how smart young people really are and how
Mhm.
really perceptive they can be.
Yeah.
This whole notion of, well, I'm an adult and you're not, so therefore I know more than you do, or I can more correctly, I can understand more than you can. Well, no, you know what? That's not strictly true. Just,
Mhm.
just stop. Yeah. So that's that. That's really my deal with that. But I mean, I had to. I, I, I always used to. I stopped reading fiction. I would say, I would read occasionally. I would read mostly nonfiction. The
Mhm.
last, I would say the last 15 years of my career. I taught 32 years, probably the last 15 to 17. I read almost entirely nonfiction things in philosophy, cultural anthropology,
Mhm.
again, mythology, a lot of other ologies, okay? And because I felt it would make my classroom conversations and discussions more interesting, which it did.
Yeah.
It
More complex.
Yeah,
More
more complex.
layers.
Yeah, because I don't believe that with young people that you give them narrow views. You know what I mean? You just your job is to try to open them up.
Yeah, because
And
they're complex creatures trying to get comfortable in their own skin and learn about
yeah,
how life is working. So you're giving them exactly what they need at the time to question everything, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to question everything. And then they have their parents who are trying to suppress them and not answer any of their questions. So where do
yeah.
they go?
Well, see, here's the thing. As you know, in past podcasts, I try to be very even-handed about parents. I mean, there are some excellent, outstanding parents, grandparents,
Hmm.
single parents. Okay,
Step
who
parents.
yeah, they do. What's that?
Step parents.
Step parents. Oh,
Yeah.
well, yeah. But I think that what happens is that there are. It's like okay, like in every area of life. There are some really, really great doctors. There are some really incompetent doctors. So
Yep.
some really excellent, outstanding teachers, and there are really undedicated, incompetent teachers. I mean, it's a mixed bag, and
Hmm.
as parents, it's a mixed bag. I've known wonderful. I remember some of the most excellent uh, mentors for young people were actually grandparents who had to take over the grooming, if you will, the education. Although grooming is becoming a bad word now with the Republicans because they're so freaking stupid. Um, well, I mean, they're just arrogant. You know, they're arrogant and they're evil and mean and nasty. Um, but anyway, you know, just raising these young people to be
Yeah.
real live,
Mhm.
decent adults, and trying to make them happy when they've had parents who either died or are drug addicted or alcoholic or whatever
Yeah.
their problem.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, it really takes like a village. So thank God there are grandparents out there that are helping.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I didn't have the virtue of that. So I grew up without grandparents.
Hmm.
Lots of people, like in my own family, you know, they have an overabundance of grandparents because they have the natural grandparents, but they may have been, but their parents were divorced, so they have those natural grandparents, and then they have the step parents who become like grandparents, you know,
Hmm.
their
Hmm.
grandparents, right?
Hmm.
So what happens is that that if you have that extended family, can be really beneficial to a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Uh, and of course, I've always touted the the great job that schools can do, centralized it being the ones we know about, that they are become that village that you're talking about, where they're helping to raise kids and protect kids
Hmm.
and you know, guide them and so on. And you know, I'm like I said, I had a lot of colleagues of mine that I thought, wow, these students here are so lucky to have these kinds of people. Were there losers? Were there incompetent SOBs? Absolutely. But the good news was that there were enough good people
Hmm.
uh, teaching in that building.
Yeah,
And
I
by the way,
totally agree. I mean, because I didn't have, if like my parents were not loving and supportive and all of that, so and then I didn't have grandparents who were either that, and they would be even more distant to how my parents were. So the only other like village of people that I had were the teachers of CI.
and again, I think that most of us were really well aware of what our responsibility was. And one of the reasons why, going back to the Jabberwocky story, is that it said that, you know, this is the life that all of us go through, where you have to at some point separate yourselves from either your childhood,
Yeah.
separate yourselves from your family, or you
Hmm.
separate yourselves from whatever, and then you're going to go off and you're going to have these experiences, whether you like them or want them or not. You're going to be faced with obstacles,
Hmm.
and the issue is, do I believe I can, you know, be triumphant with those obstacles? Can I resolve the issues, whether they be
Hmm.
personal, emotional, physical, educational, whatever they are? And the whole point of this whole thing about it, the metaphor of separation, initiation, return, is that it suggests, well, yes, you can, and as long as you understand that this is not abnormal, that this is what life is all about. Okay,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's all of us go through it, all of us do. Okay, and so then in religious terms, you look and say, well, what's the story about Christ? Well, okay, so Christ separates from his family. He says, I'm going to go do my father's business. He tells his mother, okay, he goes off and he does his preaching, boop, boop, boop. And then what happens is, so he's got these, he's in the world, and then ultimately he gets crucified, right? And how does he return? He gets resurrected, you see? So now the ultimate metaphor in something like Catholicism and Christianity is, well, okay, you're gonna when you die, you're gonna be separated from this life, and then you're initiated into whatever exists on the other side of life. And according to, if you believe in all the stuff from most religions, that somehow you're gonna return, you're gonna be resurrected, or you're gonna be reincarnated, or things
Hmm.
like that. For me personally, none of that works, but that's another story. Okay, time for another podcast. But um, uh, this is the importance of literature of all kinds, you know,
Hmm.
and so whenever I was very cognizant, whenever I was in the classroom, how could I make whatever book, story, poem,
Yeah.
and discussion of those relate to the life that my students were living
Hmm.
and were possibly going to live.
Yeah. Which I feel like is so beautiful in that you are having that compassion and empathy to connect with them because you're relating it to them, when
Yeah.
really a lot of teachers are just reading the book and reading the lessons and teaching you what needs to be taught. You need to get your grades, you need to pass the test, but they're not trying to relate it to them. So, which is beautiful and pertinent of what you had taught.
Well, I mean, I used to say this, like I used to say that one of my things was, well, why does an author write a book? Why does an author write a book? Okay. Why is he writing it? Whatever the book is. And then you say, okay, so why do you think this author wrote this book or this poem or whatever? Okay. And what is he trying to tell you? A, and B, how do you relate to that? In education, when it comes to, they have something called reader response theory, and that is that instead of saying, well, uh, doing all the nuts and bolts and going through every phrase and every vocabulary word and all the sentence structure and doing like taking a piece of work and dissecting it in some critical way, and uh, what the reader response thing says is, what is the reaction of the reader
Mm-hmm.
whenever that reader reads that piece of literature. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I did book discussions at the public library. Uh, they were kind of astounded. I used to have to tell them because they'd come in and I think they were expecting, because I was teaching at the university, it was going to be some kind of like a three credit course in literature. No, and what I was taught to do is,
Little do they know who they're coming to hang out
well, they certainly learned they learned the hard way that that was not my deal.
with.
I
Yeah,
told to tell them, I said first, because I remember one woman said, "Well, you don't really talk about the book much." I said,
yeah.
and I said, "Well, did you read it? Yeah, okay. So then, well, what did you get out of it?
Hmm.
Okay, how did you respond to? So let's go to this passage, and how did you respond to that passage? Well, it's reminded me of it's reminded me when I had when I was growing up in my parents' house, and I had a fight with my brother. Oh, okay, great.
Hmm.
Okay, okay. So what does that tell us? And then I might say, well, yeah, I remember, civil rivalry is a big deal. Okay.
Hmm.
I said that's why I used to teach not I didn't teach Hamlet to seniors, which a lot of teachers did. I taught King Lear. Why did I teach King Lear? Hey, that was about sibling rivalry. It's always about a parent who doesn't understand or appreciate his children, doesn't know who they really are and how it works against him or for him. Okay, so that was a book I could make King Lear relate more easily to
Yeah.
my seniors than I could Hamlet, because people say, oh, well, Hamlet, he's searching for himself. That's a teenagers are looking for, trying to figure out who they are. I thought that's great. Okay, that's great. But I always thought Hamlet was a bit of a weasel and a wimp. I was not a Hamlet fan. I was really a King Lear fan. In terms of play.
Yeah.
So, but that to me, I felt was much more relevant and relatable to teenagers in my classroom as seniors. King
Yeah.
Lear.
Totally.
Right? And that was my point. So going back to the book discussions, they started to realize that I had a psychiatrist. He was in his 90s. Well, actually, when I met him, he was in his late 80s, and he had came. I was so sad when he died. He came to like 4 years worth. I was doing the book discussions for 17, 18 years, but he was there for 4 years when he discovered discussions. And he once told the reference librarian who used to always monitor the discussions, he says,
Hmm.
one of the things I like about Bill's discussions is he'll tell these personal anecdotes. And what it does
Hmm.
is about, based upon the book that we're reading.
Yeah.
And, and it gets the rest of the group, makes them feel free to put in their own anecdotes.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
consequently, what we're talking about is how this book, or the stuff in the book, okay, um, relates to their lives and how they responded to the book and
Yeah.
and this is something that they were not used to it. They were expecting a three credit course where I was going to speak for an hour and a half, and they were going to write notes. And I said, no, 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 this is not what this is. This is not a college class. This is a sense of, if you're reading, and I did classics. I started off with all the classics. What did you get from this book? What
Hmm.
did you get from reading Oedipus Rex by Sophocles? What's
Hmm.
that play all about, really? What line? One of my favorite lines from that play, especially as I got older, is uh, the was it the messenger is telling the king about how about his people he thought were his parents, how the king that person had died, And so he said, "Well, how did he die?" He said, "Well, this question says, small things put old bodies to sleep, and it
Mm.
doesn't take much to kill an old
Mm.
person."
Hmm.
Okay, really. But I mean, there's a level of wisdom and relevance in something a line like that, especially
That's
since
a
many.
beautiful, profound line.
Yeah, well, especially since so many of their people, their parents, their elderly parents, had died from for lots of different reasons, you know.
Yeah.
But it it resonates with them. So
It totally, even for, for me, I feel like that it's accumulation of everything that you've been going through that can add to the stress of your life, your fight or flight.
yeah, yeah.
And,
So yeah, so I kind of uh, always looked at and people said, well, I remember I had a student teacher. She goes, Captain. She goes, how did you arrive at this notion of literature as being, you know, life and relevant to life? I said, well, when I was a kid taking the English Regents, okay, in the
mhm,
old days, I don't know if they still. Yes, I haven't seen a English Regents in years. But in the essay questions, you would have a part A, part B, and a part C, I believe. But in the questions, the first line of the question for you, whether it was on short works or long words, they would say, here was the line: in literature, as in life, in literature, comma, as in life, comma, and then they'd have a thesis. There is conflict. Okay, and that would be on every the first line of every essay question, and it was for decades, decades. So I said, well, wait a second. Well, if I had any doubts as a beginning teacher, what I was supposed to be emphasizing in the literature that I was instructing students about was about, okay, how is this about life? And more specifically, how is it about the life that they, in fact, have already lived, are living now, and will live in the future?
mhm,
And that to me was the key. Though, so the discussion, and that meant also anything in life was fodder for discussion, from abortion to zoology, A to Z. It could
mhm.
be anything, and the only responsibility for me was that I was checking on my dogs. They're, sit, sitting on my recliner. Well, actually, they're lying down sleeping. Um, that was my only responsibility because I wanted them to know when they came into that classroom that they were there not only to get knowledge, but they were there, as I was, with their help to get wisdom. See, it wasn't about getting knowledge. Knowledge is
Mhm,
one thing. I can
mhm.
give a student knowledge. Any teacher can give a student knowledge.
Yeah,
I
you can
can't
go
give,
to the library and read.
yeah, but I can't give them wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay? Wisdom is something that it's hard fought, hard won, and they have to, if they have X amount of knowledge and they're perceptive with that knowledge and they
Mhm.
can connect it to their experiences, they might get wise.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that was the goal. But I used to always have to tell them by the end of the year, just remember, being wise doesn't make you happy. Doesn't make you happy. Wisdom
Mhm.
kind of says, "Oh shit, man, uh, yeah, now I understand a lot more, and it
Mhm.
ain't pretty. It ain't pretty."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the joke of, like, ignorance is bliss when you don't know all of it. You're
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
in your own little world. But
Yep.
yeah, a couple of things that I wanted to point out as you're speaking is that I was either listening or reading a podcast, and they were talking about what's the most important thing that patients appreciate about doctors and like the doctors.
Right.
They had done a whole survey of all these doctors,
Uh-huh.
and the most popular doctors that the patients would connect with were ones that were empathetic and
Right.
had that tone of voice of like caring and
Right.
actually asking the patients, all
Sure.
of that. And that's super important. I think that's what you gave to the students, empathy and compassion, to hear their story. And this Jabberwocky was super important to me also because I realized that naturally became a thing of how I do my podcast is when one of my guests come in, they tell me their story, and then
Right.
I in return tell them one of my stories, so it's
Sure.
the
Sure.
relatability, connectability of all of that. So I think that's a beautiful key point that I was able to connect the dots on when I listened to your
Uh-huh.
video on YouTube.
Well, I'm glad you watched it. You know, I'm always because you know one of the things about even the podcast we do, I'll give the links to people so they can see all of them.
Hmm.
And as much as I would like every person to give the link to watch all of them,
Hmm.
not out of ego, but because I think that to me this is another way of educating people
It
into
it is,
uh,
and this is why. That's why when you ask me like you don't have to do this, I'm like no, but I think it's very important. I think we need to do this and we need to document it because I I um I think your talks and your lessons and your knowledge and your wit and wisdom need to be documented to live on forever. Really.
well, that's I'm gonna say that that would almost be grandiose, except I know you're sincere about it, A, and B, if there's any way I can continue living forever, I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know,
I completely agree. And I feel like you are literally one of a kind and a beautiful mentor that I keep close to me. And I told you I've adopted you as my father, so you're not going anywhere.
well, that is that is a truly great honor indeed.
Yeah.
That really is. But I have to say this, you know, people talk about, oh, well, the Bible is, but well, guess what? There are a lot. I'm sorry, there are a lot better, wiser books than the Bible out there. And I think that my job also was as being someone who said, well, you know, my being an atheist helped a lot because I said, you know, listen, young people, there are a lot of other books out there that you can read that has wisdom and you know, insight to teach you. Okay,
Hmm.
and since a lot of the when people say, well, the you know, God wrote the Bible, no, God didn't read the Bible. People wrote the Bible, and people say like they said about Dante. When they talk about Dante's Divine Comedy, he didn't call it the Divine Comedy. He just called it the comedy. Other people call it divine. They said, "Oh my God, this is so unbelievable. This is so special.
Yeah.
It must have been inspired by God." Utter twaddle. Total, total rubbish. No, the Bible was not divinely inspired. So let's get over that nonsense. Let's get clear, okay?
Hmm.
And a lot of different books were written by a lot of different people. Most of them, I thought, were probably very well bearded, unwashed shepherds living in caves and whatever. I mean, I'm not, you know, and so I'm not a big fan. I think I said if I was on a desert island and I had to pick five books to for the rest of my life, the Bible would not be one of the five. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
so but that's me, you know,
Yeah.
and
Wait, but what are your fives?
I'm not giving you five other. I mean, I'd have to really think about some of them, but I
Mm.
certainly would.
Okay.
I certainly feel that. I think I told you, Henry Fielding's uh, Tom Jones is certainly pretty much number one on my list because at least it's funny, it's
Hmm.
satirical, things like that.
Hmm.
But again, any I would probably want I would probably want the Boy Scout field book when I was a kid. When I was a kid, the original one, I think one of the original copies of the Boy Scout field book, it
Hmm.
told you how to survive in the woods and
Yeah, I
places.
mean, like if you're gonna be just stuck on a deserted
Yeah,
island, I think you're gonna need that, right?
yeah. How to build a lean-to and how to start
Yeah, how to
fires.
build a fire, how to build a
Yeah,
shelter,
yeah,
all
yeah.
of
I
that,
want
that's
practical.
needed.
Oh, yeah. I want to.
I was
I want to.
watching a lot of videos on YouTube about that because I was kind of having like a mental breakdown of like, oh my God, Ukraine, and like, what if like I lose power and I can't build
Sure.
so I started like watching all these videos on how to build a fire, how to do this, how to do that.
But see, that
But
makes sense. That makes
yeah,
sense. Okay.
yeah, it's
You know,
important.
sure. You know, and how do you get fresh water? You know,
Yeah,
you got to do certain things so that you can get condensation to get fresh water, and you know.
exactly,
So I mean,
exactly.
there's all kinds of stuff, and of course, like even now, and there's a because of my Boy Scout background. Like for example, in my house, we're on over an acre and in the middle of the woods and stuff. And for example, I make sure that we have a wood burning fireplace in case we need heat.
I want to do one of those.
Yeah, and then I also had a gas burning fireplace, propane, in the living room, which I like because I can just press a button on the remote and the flames shoot up. Okay,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
the fact is, if let's say the propane ran out and I couldn't replenish it, I'd have the wood burning. You know,
Yeah,
so
seriously,
I,
this is what I was really researching on how to do a wood burning one
wait,
in
but
my
more than that,
house.
yeah, one of the things I did was, I swapped out my electric stove up in the kitchen, put that down in the basement, which I still use,
Hmm.
and but then I put in a gas burning, stove. Because first of all, they had a special burner to do uh, Chinese cooking with a wok that you'll appreciate. You're gonna have to give me some of your family recipes, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
And in fact, Li Ming once told me because I was talking about, well, how do you guys? Because I was taking Chinese cooking courses. How do you guys get that fried rice to, She goes, "It's a secret. I'm not going to tell you." I went, oh, well, thanks, Li Ming. And by the way, I want this you to know. I want to remind her she was the one who actually taught me how to use chopsticks.
Oh, really?
Yes, absolutely. I
That's
kind
so
of fumbled,
funny.
but she told me, and of course I used to go in. I used to I used to go into class, and sometimes I would have like noodles, Chinese noodles, in
Hmm.
a cup, and I used to have my eating with my chopsticks. Sometimes in front of my students,
Yeah.
and my favorite thing to do was to show them how I could, with my chopsticks, take a green pea that was in the soup
Hmm.
and grab it and hold it and not have it fall to the ground and of course pop it in my mouth, right? And of course that I think it was in that movie. Oh God,
Karate Kid?
Karate Kid. Yeah, where I think the Japanese guy, Pat Morita, the
Uh-huh.
actor, he would take the chopsticks and catch a fly with it. Was that
Hmm.
was that the, was,
Hmm.
did that happen? Now that's the way I remember.
I think
Okay,
so. I'm not
and
sure.
unfortunately, I guess the good news was I didn't have any real flies in my classroom. But I would have tried to have done that if I had,
Hmm.
But I think that this thing about there's a certain survivalist mentality that I have.
Yeah.
So I always have X amount of canned goods, dry
Hmm.
goods. Now, of course, I've got four different ponds and two streams. And
Hmm.
one of the things I always think about is that all of a sudden, let's say now, because of drought or all of a sudden you couldn't get water, I've got
Mm.
5,000 gallons in my one big pond, and all I've got to do
Wow.
is, it's pretty much clean. But I
And
would, I would
mhm.
I'd purify. You can, you boil it. They've got
Yeah.
purification
Or get some
tablets.
filters and stuff like that.
Yeah. Because the key is that what's going to happen in this culture eventually is we see eh, how the culture is degrading.
Yeah.
We're seeing the end of democracy. It's becoming a fascist country.
Hmm.
Okay, this the Supreme Court thing is going to make it even worse. It's gonna it's it you know it's going to go backwards, not forwards, and it's sad. Now I don't have to worry about it because I'm 76. So let's assume I make it to 80. I might have to deal with the ugliness in the next 4 years. Okay, you and your children, unfortunately, are going to have to really deal with it. Okay,
Hmm.
so, and I think that we have to, as always, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And I
Yes.
think people nowadays have to be much more cognizant of that because a lot of the structures that we have, hey, suppose we have real conflagrations, real warfare in this country. Look at what's happening in Ukraine.
I
Okay,
know.
they
Yeah.
can't get food, right? They're not getting water. There are problems, and so I think that, and again, what literature teaches us, and this is going back to the literature again, is that unfortunately, human nature is what it is, and there's the evil dark side, and there's the pure good side, and the evil can break out at any time for any reason, and
Hmm.
that means you have to be prepared for it,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and so I just think that we have literature of all kinds can teach us a lot of things,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I think that those of us who are reflective and interested and concerned, uh, look, I mean, I haven't read fiction in a long time,
Hmm.
and most people read fiction for entertainment. When I was younger, I kind of did that, but I also, and this is what scares parents, okay, is that if books are properly written, as far as I'm concerned, especially when I was younger, you know, I automatically assumed as a reader that the main character was supposed to be me. In other words, I was supposed to identify with that main character. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, when those main characters were positive, that was okay. If the characters, especially as time went on in more modern literature and movies and stuff, the characters, the protagonists were anti-heroic,
Hmm.
kind of morally ambiguous,
Hmm.
That's a problem if a young person is not really astute, perceptive, and sensitive. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they may well pick up on the bad side and
Hmm.
think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the concerns that I can understand why parents may have. However, I don't subscribe to the notion that we've have talked about this before that uh, if a kid reads a book about gay kids and identifies with the character, that doesn't mean he's going to turn gay. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that at all.
Hmm.
But I just think that um I'm always interested in what the author's message is when they have a dark character like that.
Hmm.
You know?
Hmm.
And usually, if I'm lucky, and we're lucky, is that the ultimate moral is this person's more was morally ambiguous and suffers because of it.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the lesson should be learned, you know?
Yes, I totally agree. And I want to wrap this thing up. And then I can't wait to see you in the next podcast where we talk about Roe versus Wade and what's happening in our culture now with the Supreme Court. So I want to thank you very much. And anybody who's watching, if they can help us and click subscribe, because that helps the algorithm, helps it get to more people. And ultimately, end of the day, it helps me eventually to get paid to be able to do my ads so I can keep doing these podcasts and not go back to the rat race of corporate world to a 9 to 5 and be able to do what I love, which is talking to people and talking to guests and getting their life stories and life lessons.
Well, I wish you lots of luck in that, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. How about that?
Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.
Very good.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye now.